Hi guys, the recipe I'm going to share with you today has to be the pie of the month for October. There's just no way around it, and that makes me a very happy lady. I adore pumpkin pie, and I want to show you a new version of Libby's pumpkin pie recipe. This is probably going to become your new favorite fall dessert. This pumpkin pie recipe is creamy. It has the perfect amount of cinnamon and spice, not to mention it's baked inside of my perfectly flaky homemade crust. So let's get to it. So the first thing we started with is making our homemade crust. So we just have some flour in a bowl and then I grated in my butter. I like to do this because it's just easier to incorporate your butter into your flour. Some people use pastry cutters, but I just like it this way easier. Grating is just, it makes the butter really small, so I don't have a whole lot of work to do with my hands. But after I have used my hands to incorporate the butter, then I'm just going to add the other ingredients for the crust, which is an egg, some salt, a little bit of vinegar, and some ice water. It's pretty basic. After that, you're just going to mix it. I do not know why I started with a wooden spoon because I quickly graduated to my hands because it's just the best way to mix a pie crust. You just want to make sure that you don't over mix it. As soon as it starts coming together and creating a dough, you're good to go. And then I'm going to roll it in a ball. I'm going to put it in some plastic wrap and flatten it so that it's just easier to roll out after it's rested in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes. Now, if you've ever made the Libby's pumpkin pie filling recipe from the back of the can, you know that they've got it right. And it's such an easy recipe to follow. If it's your first time baking or making a classic pumpkin pie recipe for the holidays, it is a great one to use. But the good news is once you've gotten on your feet, you can learn to make slight adjustments to your recipes and make them even more delicious to suit your tastes. So you might be wondering what makes this new version of Libby's pumpkin pie recipe better than the original. Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you. I'm going to give you a side-by-side comparison of the ingredients for the original and my recipe, and then I'll explain why I decided on these swaps and what their benefits are. So the original Libby's recipe uses white sugar, 2 eggs, some evaporated milk, and then individual spices. So I went from white sugar to brown sugar because to me it adds more depth of flavor. So both of these sugars are going to give the pie sweetness, but the brown sugar is a deeper flavor. Then I went from 2 eggs to 3 eggs. It makes the pie more custardy and rich. And then I opted not to use evaporated milk. Instead, I like to use heavy cream because I'm a huge lover of heavy cream and I'm not really the biggest fan of evaporated milk. It's okay, but it's not creamy and it doesn't have a lot of flavor. So this swap just made more sense to me and it makes this pie super rich and decadent. And then the last thing is an easy swap from individual spices to a pre-made pumpkin pie spice mix. I use the McCormick. The pre-made spices are just easier to use and they're perfectly crafted for this recipe. I recently made this pie for my dad, who once again told me he's not a big fan of pumpkin pie, but I convinced him to try a slice and immediately he changed his mind. His exact words were something like, "Oh, I could eat this. It has lots of spice and flavor. This is good." And I completely agree with him. It's the best pumpkin pie I've ever made, and it's going to land on the Thanksgiving menu this year. As always, guys, you can find the complete recipe and all of the directions on the blog at www.jessiesfoodfaithandfamily.com. You'll also find some ideas about what to do with leftover pumpkin pie and some tips and tricks for this recipe to make sure it comes out perfectly every single time. You have to make it, guys. You have to.